Ger Deering was appointed Ombudsman for Ireland by President Michael D. Higgins in January 2022, and he's established and led a number of public bodies. And Ger has considerable experience in consumer and employment rights, and I believe is an emo man as well. A very good morning, Ger.
Good morning, Ronan.
Ger, I suppose you and the Ombudsman, I know you've released a report on 2023 with some stats, and we'll look at kind of the number of complaints and stuff raised across Laois, Offaly and Westmeath over the past year or so too. But I suppose just give people a recap, the role of the Ombudsman and I guess how important it is in a democracy.
Yeah, you outlined it very well in your introduction there, Ronan. And as you say, it is an important part of democracy because we hold government to account. And everyone likes to be treated fairly and reasonably and with dignity and respect. So when somebody is applying for something to a public body or needs a service or is just interacting with them, if they're unhappy with how they've been dealt with, if they're unhappy with the result of the application they've made, they should first complain to the public body concerned. But if they still feel that they have not been treated properly, they can come to us. And I particularly mention about being treated with dignity and respect because it's not just about whether you've got the product or the service or the grant that you were looking for. It's also how you treated with, how you dealt with as you were going through that process. And we firstly tried to resolve the complaint informally and amicably and quickly. And indeed, we managed to get about 80% of our complaints resolved like that in about 3 months. But where that doesn't happen then, we carry out an investigation and we can make a recommendation to the public body as regards what we believe would resolve any particular complaint. And just to say as well, we don't just deal with individual complaints. It's very important that we do actually deal with individual complaints and resolve those. But if we see a trend or an issue or something we think is a problem, I can carry out a systemic complaint across a service or across a public body.
And indeed, your 40 years the office has been in existence now, and even the past year you've began an awareness campaign to make people more aware of that. Your 2023 report showed actually an increase in the number of complaints that you've investigated too. So clearly that work is having the effect.
Yes, it absolutely is. We're very happy to engage with people like yourself and your own station. And indeed, I've been on the station a couple of times, and we always find that when we do these outreach events with yourself, with radio stations, and also we're working through the public participation networks, the PPNs. Each county has each of your 3 counties would have a network where all of the voluntary bodies and the community groups and all that are part of it, and we're engaging with those because what we want is that people would know where to turn to when they are unhappy, when they've been treated badly, or when they've received a bad service from a public service provider. And as you outlined in your introduction, we deal with a very broad range of, everybody in one way or other, Ronan, we all deal with public service almost on a daily basis or certainly on a weekly basis. We all interact. If you take, for example, we deal with complaints against social protection, and we've outlined some case studies there where, for example, somebody who went to social protection when he reached the age of 66 was given the impression that he wasn't actually entitled to a pension, but then discovered at 70 years of age that he was. And social protection said, well, we can only backdate for 6 months. But we got involved and we made the point that the person had gone in good faith and got wrong information. So we managed to get that payment backdated to 66. And I particularly picked that because, as far as I understand, social welfare do something like 80 million transactions in a year. So there will be mistakes and there will be problems. And in any walk of life, it's actually how we deal with a complaint or a problem or an issue when it arises that actually matters.
And if anybody, gets a copy of the 2023 report, and it's available on the website too, but if we look at some of the case studies in that as well, council's withdrawal of emergency accommodation was inappropriate and unreasonable. Man wrongly refused carers allowance for medical report was missed by appeals office as well. Hospital refused to deal with bereaved parents complaint as it was outside the time limit, and outdated referral processes see hospital appointment and cancer diagnosis delayed. You can begin to see, particularly when you spoke at the start about dignity and about making sure that these aren't just dare I say kind of analytical complaints. There's actually they're person centred.
They're quite emotive. Some of the ones you've mentioned there, if you take the 2 hospital ones in particular, you can imagine the situation where bereaved parents, they have a lot to cope with, an awful lot to cope with. And then when they went to go engage with the hospital to be told that you're outside the time limit, that was just unreasonable. And I'm glad to say the hospital did actually engage. The one in St. Vincent's Hospital, that was actually where a person had a transplant. And apparently when you've had a transplant, you are more susceptible or more at risk of cancer. So the person was referred on to another part of the hospital. But unfortunately, it was actually by letter. So the letter got lost in the hospital. We engaged with the hospital. That person at least got their referral, and thankfully, I believe, a good outcome. But we engaged with the hospital then to say this shouldn't happen again. And as an initial offer, the hospital said, well, we're going to get a new printer and, all that. We thought, no, in this day and age, one part of a hospital printing a letter and sending it to another part of a hospital is hardly the most efficient and safest way. So I'm glad to say they engaged and are putting in place a new electronic referral system that should avoid this happening in the future. And as you say, it's not just about money. It's not about those kind of things. There are a whole range of life-changing events tied up in all of these interactions that we deal with.
And thankfully, again, people across Laois, Offaly and Westmeath, we can see from the annual report, like overall 4,465 complaints dealt with, an increase in all counties. Now, a modest enough increase, up kind of 1-2% across the three counties in terms of the number of complaints made as well. In terms of if somebody does want to make a complaint to your office, it's free to do so. But how did it go about doing that?
Yeah, it is absolutely free to do so. And again, just to remind people to make the complaint to the public body first. And if they're not happy with that answer, or indeed, if they don't get a response or an answer from the public body, then they can come to us. And for many people, probably the easiest way is to go online. Our website is ombudsman.ie, and there's a complaint form on there that they can fill out. But also, we are very conscious that not everybody wants to do things online. And in fact, we use what I tend to call old-fashioned innovation, Ronan, that we actually answer the phone. And I say that because a lot of bodies now, and even in the private sector, a lot of bodies have their phone numbers well hidden and don't want to talk to people. But we understand that sometimes people would want to at least check out first whether they can make a complaint to us, and secondly, maybe they need some assistance to put the complaint together. So they can ring us. It's 01 639 5600. That's 639 5600. Or indeed, they can write to us at 6 Earlsford Terrace, Dublin 2. Or if people need to, they can come in and sit down with somebody. That would be by appointment. So we try to make our service as accessible as we possibly can because, after all, we do hold other public bodies to account. So we need to make our own service as accessible as possible, and we aim to do that.
Yeah, it's almost a breath of fresh air to hear that you pick up the phone and actually people can come face to face and visit you. It seems an alien thing because you just need to look up and look at some articles around, say, some big, you call it utility or big corporations. They have trigger words and keywords, and unless you use them, your complaint won't be escalated. It really is an art and a science in itself. But within the report as well, Gerdo, there's also follow-up on previous reports, and this is important too because you're not just making recommendations, you're actually following up to see that action are taken. Two reports in particular, Wasted Lives from 2021 and Grounded from 2021. Can you take us through maybe an overview of those and the follow-ups that you've looked for?
Wasted Lives was an investigation carried out by my predecessor, Peter Tyndall, and it was in relation to people in nursing homes under 65 who really shouldn't be and don't need to be in nursing homes, where it's not the most appropriate setting. And this is not a reflection on any nursing home. It's a fact. It's the fact that somebody at 30 years of age needs to be in a different setting and with different services. And it was very disappointing to find that there at that stage were about 1,300 people we could see who were in nursing homes who, they might have had an acquired brain injury, or they unfortunately had an accident, or something had happened, which meant when they were leaving hospital, they weren't able to go home, or there wasn't accommodation for them, and they were put in nursing homes. Now, we don't have a problem with people transferring to nursing homes on a short-term basis until, more suitable accommodation is found for them. So we engaged we made recommendations and engaged with the HSE, and I'm happy up to a point with the outcome of that, in that a number of people have transitioned into more suitable accommodation, and that's really important. And we have some really good success stories, and it's fantastic when it happens, but it's too slow. And we are now engaging with the HSE, and in fact, I'm going to engage with government as well in terms of the budget. There's a willingness on the part of the HSE, but I'm now hearing that their budget isn't sufficient for this. And this is false economy in a sense, Ronan, because a person has to be paid for in a nursing home anyway. And this is about actually, using the money in the most suitable way for the person concerned. But what we have seen is the way people are able to live a much more fulfilled life. And we even found a situation, for example, where a person, they had their home, they had the house and they had the home, they were in a position to move, but actually they needed an assessment, an occupational assessment to get a proper wheelchair for it. And because they were in a nursing home, those assessments aren't done in nursing homes. So we had this very bizarre situation where the person had somewhere to move to, but they couldn't move. When they would move, they would get the assessment done, but they couldn't move until they got the assessment done. I'm glad to say those are the kind of situations where we bring common sense, and we got that situation resolved. So that's wasted lives. We are engaging very strongly now with the HSE to improve this process and get far more people under 65 who don't need to be in nursing homes out of nursing homes. I'm sorry to say that I can't express the same progress or optimism around Grounded, which is actually about transport for people with disabilities. My predecessors and myself have been pushing strongly, and in fact I described in my 2021 annual report, I described it as a disgrace, the way people with disabilities have been treated in this country in a number of ways, but particularly in relation to the lack of access to transport. For 10 years now, 2 schemes that were there that were investigated by my office, they were closed on the basis that they weren't adequate. And instead of improving them and making them suitable and adequate, they actually were closed and have not been replaced. So really, and I've written to all the political parties actually in the last week to say that, in their manifestos, and not just in their manifestos, but if they're in government, this is an issue that actually needs to be resolved. Could I just mention one other report as
Absolutely,
well, which is the treatment abroad scheme. We called the report In Sickness and in Debt. And this was an example of where they're really good schemes. There are really good schemes where if people can't get treatment in this country, either it's not available or it's not going to be done within a reasonable period of time, they can actually travel abroad and have the money refunded. Now, the schemes themselves are very good, but what we actually found was that the HSE was administering them in far too bureaucratic a fashion. And we made 21 recommendations. Bernard Gloucester had just come in as the new CEO of the HSE, and I'm very pleased to say he embraced the report and agreed to implement the recommendations. And I'll give you some examples. So somebody would go to their GP and get a referral to have, say, hip replacement done or a cataract replacement done in another jurisdiction. That could be Northern Ireland, could be England, it could be further afield. They go abroad, they have the treatment done, they pay for it in good faith and arrive back and find that the GP's letter wasn't signed by the GP, it was signed by the receptionist. It was genuine, there was nothing wrong, everybody acted in good faith. In one particular case, I know the GP actually wrote a letter confirming this was my referral, but the HSE said no, it must be signed by the GP and that can't be rectified. Yeah, I'm pleased to say we have actually managed to get all of those cases overturned, but more importantly, it's an example of where the scheme is now operating far, far better for people who want to use the scheme today.
Fantastic. And Bennett, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're just out of time. But actually, our listeners text in, and I won't go through specific things on air, but they've said they've had one issue with a kind of a sporting body that's backed by the taxpayer, and they said they will go and make a complaint to the Ombudsman now. So again, thank you for coming on this morning and taking us through those things and talking really about that, the dignity piece and the human-centric piece as well, and then the follow-up and trying to resolve those complaints and follow through. But for now, Ger Deering, Ombudsman, thank you so much for that this morning.
Thanks, Ron.
And thank you all for your texts as well. A few people have texted in about different issues, say we won't bring them out on air, but I think even what the one Ger mentions there about disability access and public transport, that is one we might follow up on Saturday View, maybe even next Saturday as well. So if you're affected by that, please get in touch with us here at Midlands 103 and we will take that debate on air maybe next Saturday morning.